Welcome to part 2 of my chat with my friend and Emmy-winning cinematographer Richard Fitzpatrick. In part 1 we just talked about the GoPro and the settings for underwater. Now in part 2 we will talk about how to move with the camera. How to build sequences for great storytelling. And last but very important, what a diver needs to do in order to achieve all of the above. Also, please note, this is not typical just for the GoPro, but it is for any diver using any type of camera rig underwater. When you started talking about either you move the camera like this or you move it like this. So can you just talk a little bit around that, Richard? I thought that was really well explained.
The worst thing about GoPro footage is when you're watching it and it's
can't agree more.
Yeah, so then and pans. People always like pan.
Yeah.
Like if you watch a documentary, a pan is about that at the most, like 15 degrees, tilt 15, 20 degrees. So the movement should be slower than what you think when you first start filming. But the other thing too is, if you're swimming forwards, keeping it straight, not like this. If you watch any documentary or a movie or stuff like that, the cameras are tracking this way or going up. It's a linear move. It's not, it might be on an angle like that, but it's still a straight move. And, you need to think about what it is you're trying to do. And when I'm filming, I often will rehearse a move underwater. I may do the same thing 2 or 3 times because you might be halfway through the move and the swell comes like that on you. And you're like, oh, shit, I've got to do it again. And then knowing where your start is and where your end is as well. So, if you're swimming over the bommy and you're filming the bommy and then I go here and now it clears frame, that's where I stop. So just knowing the beginning or end, or, another one I like to do, if that's a plate coral or a nice coral head, just an orbit around it. But in the orbit, it's staying in the same plane. It's not going so I will physically nearly every time where I can is rehearse the shot. And then if I'm swimming over certain, like a clam or something, I know as soon as that clam enters the frame and exits, that's when my shot ends. Or as soon as I see the top of that coral, that's where I slow down and my shot ends. And just seeing where it's framed is nothing worse than and speed changes too, constant speed, not and then and all this kind of stuff. So you're just keeping things as linear and as smooth and constant in terms of speed as possible. It just makes everything a lot better. And like for us the other day with the great whites, the great white swims past and goes past, it's out of shot. I always count 1, 2, 3, then reframe. Because if you come doing an edit and the shot, maybe the shark swims here and then clears the frame, you may have a dissolve or something in there. So a professional camera operator, you are trying to give your producers and your editors as many options as possible, how they use that footage in the future in terms of tempo, angles, color, space, everything. You're not doing weird white balances. You're in the middle of the road and you let and you can do all that stuff in post. There's nothing worse than we get footage because I'm in a uni. A scientist will see something really cool and basically have 10 minutes of the one shot that's really crap vision in the first place, bouncing around. They go, can we do something with this? Can we make a show out of it? And you're like, it's one shot. That is shit. You know, you should have let the animals go in and out of frame, get closer to them, get wide shots, mid shots, close-ups, make a visual story. And the best way to learn how to film is to edit your own stuff. And then you will be your own worst critic. Yeah, so you're there filming a school of fish and a dolphin shows up and comes through and eats the fish. Then you're like, you know, you got, and it happened in one take, you know. So you're there filming the fish, a dolphin comes in, eats the fish, and then leaves. So hopefully you've stayed steady and you see the dolphin come in and then at least it leaves, clears frame. Then you go, what? How can I make that into a story? Well, the school of fish is still there. So then what you can do is like, we call them point of view. So you be the animal. So the dolphin swam in from this side, swam through the fish like this and out again. So if you only had that one shot of the dolphin and then you do the point of view shot, then suddenly you can have that like at least 3 shots in your edit where the dolphin comes into the school, then you cut to your point of view of being in the school, and then cut back to the dolphin in the school, leaving the school. So your one shot is now a 3-shot sequence. So point of view shots are an amazing tool at getting you out of the poo to make a better story. And if you've got divers in the shot too, and the divers are part of your story, like we're often filming researchers doing research on the reef, so they may be counting fish or that kind of stuff. So we film them counting their fish, but then you give the GoPro to them and go, can you just swim along for a moment with the camera pointing at your face and pretend to be counting the fish? You know, that's the point of view of the researcher at work, is the camera pointing back at them. And yeah, it's a really cool way to make a visual storytelling easier. But you know, the best thing to do is watch documentaries and see how other people have done it, but think about what they're doing when you're watching the film. And often when I'm making a doco, you know, we're in the same location for weeks, sometimes months. And then, like, you know, the stuff we just did for Netflix on the life of the turtles, you're watching it as a sequence, but some of those shots are shot weeks apart. I just remember underwater is that I need a close-up of the eye of the turtle at some stage that then I can use back over here to pull all this story together. And yeah, so that, I mean, then if you look at a documentary, you know, the longest shot's normally 3 or 4 seconds or 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a long shot these days. And, you know, there'll be a wide shot that tells you, this is my seahorse living in this seagrass environment. And then the next shot will be a close-up of the whole seahorse, or it may be a super close-up of the eyeball. You know, some sequences these days, BBC love to start sequences with abstract body parts. You know, it'll be the fin of the seahorse and then the eyeball. And then you're thinking, what is this animal? And then, ta-da, there's the wide shot of the seahorse in the seagrass. Again, that comes up to the creative side of editing as to the order that you put that into how you're telling your story. But unless you have all the ingredients in the first place, you're not going to be able to make your pizza. You know, you need your wide shots, your close-ups, mid shots, extreme close-ups, point of view shots. And so if I'm, like when we were out last week, we're shooting the sea lions. I was like, okay, wide, mid, close, wide, mid, close. I've got a couple of wide, mid, closes now. I'll go do a point of view. Okay, now I'll try and do the harder ones, like an extreme close-up. And then the seahorses have gone away for a little bit. I was like, oh, I'll go shoot seagrass point of view tracking shot. See the sea lines are back. So thinking about whilst I'm filming, have I got enough close-ups, wide shots, mid shots, and all that kind of stuff. So yes, my brain is frantic when I'm underwater. And then once you get all that stuff done, then you can worry about gravy. Once you've got the meat and potatoes basics done, then you can go, okay, what can I do here that's different? Maybe a spiral in the water, break the rules, get funky. But yeah, but while I'm shooting, I'm editing in my head.
Very good. Okay, I was on a trip in Indonesia and I brought my I had 2 cameras. Long story short, I ended up only having the GoPro. I made a rig so that I could put lights onto the GoPro, and that was kind of then my main camera. And I remember from back in the days, when Ron taught me all these little tips and tricks, and him saying, okay, the smaller the camera is, actually the more difficult it is to have it steady and keep it and steady, move it. Yeah, because it's so tiny.
A GoPro, you want to be doing two-handed, not one-handed, because it just forces better stability. And then if you start hanging lights off it, then the bulk of those lights, and that you now have a bigger, like seesaw pendulum, that is easier to balance. So the bigger the rig, the easier it is.
How would you go about achieving that neutral buoyancy on that rig?
Well, if you buy a external handle set that you can buy for them, they've got threads on the bottom. So then you can actually screw on little dive weights or little fishing weights to get it neutral. Or I like to have mine just under neutral, so it's a bit negative, because I like to have something to work against. I'm not a major fan of huge neutral camera systems unless I'm doing blue water stuff and stuff like that. Because if I'm on a reef and I'm down and I want to lean on the sand, having a bit of weight, like even on my big camera systems, I keep them 1 or 2 kilograms negative.
Yeah.
So if you need flotation more, the flotation will be more to have the flotation on the arms.
Yeah.
Of the lights, to have them up here, so they're positively buoyant, but then counteract the positive with negative on the bottom of the camera, on the bottom of the tray. So when you're using it side on, you're going to have a positive up that way, negative that way. So that stops that roll like that. Roll your
tipping, the tilting.
Yeah, the tilting. Yeah. So you have the two things working against each other is the best way to do it. So on my lights, I keep my lights positively buoyant, so they're up, and it stops them drooping all the time. And just making sure that they're overlapping in the foreground, so there's no hot spots. So they're positive, so my camera's negative, and so that stops the tilting issues. And also having the 2 light arms out there, it stops the roll to a degree as well, because you've got 2 forces at 45 degrees working there. And just to help stabilize it. But the other thing too is just practice. But as I said, making the surface area of the camera bigger by putting on some wings is a massive advantage. Yeah.
And just to finish off with, when we're talking about what you covered now with the tracking and coming over and keeping the same speed and keeping the same level with the camera, so there is movement, but there is a smooth and even and calculated movement. How would you describe yourself? What kind of a diver would you have to be able to pull that off?
A good one. We say, how do you turn a really good diver into a total idiot underwater? Is give him a camera. You need to have good buoyancy skills, and that I'm using when I'm watching what I'm filming. I'm actually looking at the edges of the picture to see how stable the shot is. And checking stability. If you're in currents are easy to work in. The hardest is a surge. That's where it gets really, really hard. Is in a surgy environment, and sometimes you just got to lock yourself down on the bottom and things like in the shark cage the other day. I had to lock my legs onto the bars at the bottom, so then I could just use my whole body to compensate for the movement of the cage to keep the camera steady. So when people follow me diving, it depends what I'm doing, but it's all about camera stability. But my body may be in the weirdest bloody angles, compensating as I'm going to keep that camera, in the same plane the whole time. So as you're doing a bit of an arc, you may be going from one, the current is doing different things on your body. So it's just one of those things that just comes with time and practice. And again,
but if you had someone with you on the shoot and you didn't have to, you couldn't pick on the top of the range of the people, the assistant camera operators or other operators you could bring with you, and this was super important, and you knew this person didn't have a lot of experience, what were like 3 things you would tell that person to try and make so that person could add to the footage, like at least some of the footage was usable? What would you say to that person? 3 things.
Get your buoyancy right, straight up. First thing, unless you got your buoyancy right, just abort the dive. 2, let the action go in and out of frame. And while doing that, don't be locked on the screen the whole time. Be looking at the screen, but past the screen at what the action is. And just make sure you're documenting whatever the action is. Because you can see the diver swim out a shot here, and then I can point over here and let them come in and out of frame. So simply, buoyancy, not being target fixated on the viewfinder where it's your whole life. That can be really dangerous. You can be swimming into corals, all that kind of stuff. It keeps you mindful of where you are. If you're running the camera low over the corals, you're seeing past and you can see where it's going and what's happening, and just keeping it steady.
Fantastic. Oh my gosh, this is so valuable, Richard. It's amazing. I hope the content was valuable to you, and if it was, I appreciate you hitting the like button. If you want to see some of the GoPro footage that we shot recently, or that I shot recently in Australia, then just check out my playlist, the Australian Underwater Adventures, or Australian Adventures. All right, bye.